What if everything you knew about your family was a lie? After years of silence, Madeline Whitman returns home, not for closure, but for truth. Behind the gates of her family's legacy lies betrayal, stolen inheritance, and a bloodline secret buried for decades. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about a woman who was erased, fighting to be seen. As secrets unravel and alliances collapse, Madeline must choose forgiveness or justice. Watch as she reclaims her name, her past, and her power, one revelation at a time. I never meant to read it. I was standing in my parents' kitchen, same as I'd done 100 times before, poring over a stack of paperwork my dad couldn't figure out. Gerald Whitmore, former high school chemistry teacher turned retiree with a bad knee and worse luck with technology, had left the documents on the table like always. He trusted I'd sort them out, like always. And I did. Like always. The smell of his oversteeped Earl Grey lingered in the air. It was a crisp Tennessee morning, and the old radiator in the living room clinked to life as I flipped through Medicare forms, scanned a few utility bills, and filed away prescription receipts into their shared Dropbox folder. Then my fingers landed on something heavier, cream-colored, neatly labeled in my mother's precise handwriting. Estate plan, final copy. It wasn't curiosity that made me open it. It was exhaustion. Just last week, I'd paid the $2,178.00 property tax bill when Dad mentioned it over breakfast like he was commenting on the weather. And in 2 hours, I was supposed to pick up their blood pressure medication. Again, because they forgot the auto refill. Again. So yes, I opened the folder. Quietly, no ceremony, no guilt. Just a tired click of a paper clip and a tightening in my chest I didn't fully understand yet. The will was notarized only 2 months ago. The house paid off. Their retirement funds, still modest but intact. And the life insurance policy I helped set up, all of it. Every penny, every item, every account, to my brother Brady Whitmore. My name? One line, politely vague. We trust both our children to look after one another. That was it. No mention of the mortgage I covered 4 years ago. No nod to the quiet transfers, the groceries, the phone calls to doctors and banks and Medicaid officers. Not even a thank you. Just a carefully crafted sentence designed to sound equal but mean absence. I stood there for a long moment, the gentle whir of the scanner behind me filling the silence that stretched like static. My hands were still, my breath wasn't. Dad shuffled in with his mug. Getting through that stack, Mads? I held up the folder, my voice softer than I expected. Is this real? He paused mid-sip. I could tell by the sag in his shoulders that he already knew what I'd found. It's not what you think, he said, but it was exactly what I thought. I didn't answer him, not right away. I just watched him, this man who once helped me build a science fair volcano in the garage, stand there like he had nothing left to explain, like the choice had already been made. You've always done well, Madeline, he said. You don't need. That's the point, Dad, I said, sharper now. You made sure I wouldn't need, so you wouldn't have to give. He looked away. I walked out onto the front porch, the wooden screen door creaking shut behind me. The swing out there had new chains, ones I installed last summer after the old ones rusted through. I remembered sweating through a heat wave, covered in metal dust, while Brady sat inside playing his guitar like the world owed him a recording contract. At the time, I didn't even mind. I was raised to step in, to hold things together. I was the daughter who stayed close, the one who visited every Sunday, who said no to a leadership offer in Boston because Mom had said, it's just easier when you're nearby. Never needed them to hand me the world. I just didn't expect to be erased from it. And now here I was, 36, single, financially secure, but invisible, reduced to a line in a will and an afterthought at the kitchen table. Inside, the scanner beeped. Job complete. But something had already broken. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger comes when you think someone still deserves a reaction. What I felt was colder, a beginning of absence. Something inside me, something old and obliging, was starting to shut off. The screen door creaked again. I didn't need to look to know it was Mom. She always wore the same pale blue cardigan when she needed to say something heavy. I used to think it was comfort, a sort of soft armor. Now I wondered if it was just a prop, like the way actors wear the same costume for a particular role. She didn't sit right away. She hovered, twisting the hem of her sleeve between her fingers. "Madeline," she said. "Not too soft, not too sharp." I didn't answer. I didn't move. The oak tree across the yard had lost half its leaves. The wind pushed them across the lawn like little gold confessions. She lowered herself onto the swing beside me. "We didn't mean for you to find out like that." I let out a single breath, not a sigh, just an exhale. "It's not that we don't love you." I still didn't look at her. "What do you call love that forgets your name when it's inconvenient?" Her hand settled on mine. It was warm, trembling slightly. "Brady's had a rougher time." "You're steady, Maddie. You always have been. Steady, strong, reliable," words that feel like praise until you realize they're permission to be taken for granted. Labels used to excuse every decision that leaves you empty-handed. I pulled my hand back. "You could have told me," I said, voice even. "You could have asked." She stared out toward the street, eyes unfocused. Then she whispered it, as if saying it softer would make it easier to hear. "We had to co-sign for Brady." A pause. My heart didn't race. It didn't even beat faster. It just hardened. "How much?" She didn't respond. "Mom," I repeated, slower this time. "How much?" Still nothing. Then, almost too quiet to catch, $35,000. I stood up. The porch swing creaked under the shift of weight. So that was it. Not just a will, not just a favor, a binding legal decision, a debt they'd tied themselves to, on his behalf, and I was collateral damage. "You didn't choose him because he needed it," I said, watching the breeze tug at the wind chime. "You chose him because you already owed him." Her lips parted, her eyes widened. But I didn't stay for the reply. I walked inside, grabbed my bag, and left without another word. That night, I canceled the monthly auto deposit for their utility bills. I deleted the grocery app login I used every Thursday. I removed the reminder to call in their prescriptions. No dramatic speech, no email, no family group text, just detraction. I stopped carrying the weight. For the first week, nothing happened. No messages, no calls. Maybe they thought I was just busy. Maybe they thought I needed time. Maybe they thought I'd come back like I always did. The second week, Dad texted about the water bill being unexpectedly high. Mom asked if I could bring those low-sodium crackers Brady liked. Neither asked how I was. By the third week, the tone shifted. "Mortgage due," Mom texted. "Can you send what you usually do?" No hi. No how are you. Just a number. A need. I typed back. "Ask Brady. It's his house now." Then hit send. 5 minutes later, she called. I let it ring. Then came the guilt parade. "Please don't be like this. We need to talk." But what was there left to say? I wasn't a person to them. I was a system. And when that system stopped responding, they panicked. Brady messaged finally, "Don't make this a big deal. Just help them." Like always. Like always. Like I was a vending machine of care. Like I didn't bleed every time I gave. I stared at his message, then wrote back, "You're the one they chose, Brady, so be the choice." He didn't respond. The next morning, a transfer request hit my phone. $3,200.00. The exact amount of the overdue mortgage plus penalties. No message, just numbers. I declined it, and when the phone rang, again, Dad this time, I let it buzz until the voicemail kicked in. "You'd let your parents go homeless?" I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. They weren't homeless. They were just, for the first time, feeling what I'd carried quietly for years. And they didn't like how heavy it was. They didn't lose me when they rewrote the will. They lost me when they assumed I'd never walk away. The first thing I did wasn't scream, wasn't cry, wasn't even call Riley to ask if I had legal options. I opened the banking app and canceled the recurring deposit I'd set up for their utilities, the same one I never even told them about. Then I logged into the grocery account, paused the Thursday delivery, and deleted the note in my calendar that reminded me to reorder their medications. It wasn't rage, it wasn't spite, it was subtraction. They'd rewritten the will. I was just editing the rest. By the end of that day, I felt lighter, not healed, not free, but less tethered. Like I'd been holding my breath for so long I'd forgotten what exhaling felt like. I cooked myself dinner, real dinner, not leftovers or something from the pharmacy freezer aisle. I didn't check my phone once. The house was quiet. Not their house, mine. For a full week, nothing came. No text, no voicemail, no guilt-laced requests. The silence was eerie, but not unwelcome. It reminded me of winter mornings in college when the campus was blanketed in snow and classes got canceled, and you could walk blocks without hearing a single human voice, still suspended. By week 2, the pattern shifted. It started with a message from Dad. "Water bill came in higher this month. Can you check the account?" I didn't answer. Then Mom. "Out of low-sodium crackers." Brady forgot. That one made me pause. Not because of the crackers, but because of the assumption buried inside the message. Not a question. Not a plea. Just a gentle reminder that I was still expected to fix things. I left it unread. They weren't worried. Not yet. I could feel it. They just thought I was being difficult, overly emotional, busy with work. They'd seen this before, me retreating for a day or two after some disagreement. They thought I'd come back like I always did. Maybe they even laughed about it. "Let her cool off, she'll be fine." But I wasn't cooling, I was crystallizing. The third week was different. No pretense, no pleasantries. "Mortgage is due, can you send what you usually do?" That was the message. Nothing more, not even a greeting. I stared at the screen, then typed out 5 words. "Ask Brady, it's his house." I didn't hesitate before hitting send. The response came fast, faster than I expected. A phone call. "Mom." I let it ring until it stopped. Then another message. "Please don't be like this. We need to talk." But I had nothing left to say. They'd said everything when they cut me out. Now I was just finally living like it mattered. That evening, Brady chimed in. First time since the whole thing started. "Danny, don't make this a big deal. Just help them like always. Like always. Like reflex. Like background noise. Like I was a built-in emergency fund with no face and no name." I stared at his words until the screen dimmed. Then I typed, "You're the one they chose, Brady, so be the choice." I watched the message deliver. No reply. Not even the courtesy of anger. The next morning, they sent a transfer request. No message attached. Just numbers. $3,200.00. The exact mortgage and penalties. Like I was still a button they could press. Still a solution they didn't have to earn. I declined it. No explanation. And when Dad called again, I didn't flinch. I turned the phone over, face down on the table, and poured myself a glass of water. The silence buzzed louder than any lecture could. They'd taught me how to give. They never taught me how to leave. I was learning that now. The silence didn't last. In my family, it never could. When requests fail, the next tactic is sympathy. If that doesn't work, it's shame. And when shame doesn't land, they turn to the oldest weapon in the book, spectacle. It started small, a Facebook post, a photo of the house taken from the sidewalk, framed to look nostalgic. The caption read, "We gave everything to our children, but sometimes giving isn't enough." Dozens of likes, some from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. One from a woman I vaguely remembered from church who commented, "You two are such amazing parents." Then came Brady. Of course it was Brady. He shared the post with his own caption, "Family isn't about money, it's about showing up." The irony nearly knocked the air from my lungs. This coming from the man who hadn't paid rent in 5 years, who once spent an entire month's allowance on recording equipment and then blamed market saturation when his garage music clips stalled at 112 views. He was a professional victim, and now a curated martyr. I didn't respond. Not to him, not to the likes, not to the comments piling up like snowdrifts of ignorance. But then I saw her. Kelly, my cousin, my childhood confidant, the one who once told me I was the only adult in a family of grown children. She'd liked the post, left a heart emoji. No comment, just that. It hit harder than any of Dad's texts or Mom's voicemail, because for a second I'd truly believed she saw me, understood me. I closed the app, sat in the dark, and something broke. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. It was one thing to be misunderstood, another to be rewritten. They weren't just disappointed in me, they were revising the entire narrative, turning me from caretaker to villain, and people were eating it up. The next afternoon, an envelope showed up at my apartment, plain, no return address. Inside, a foreclosure notice, not addressed to me, but I knew the house number. The tone was formal, detached, the kind of language that slices cleaner than rage. "Your property is at risk." I sat with it for a while, thumb brushing the sharp edge of the paper, then flipped it over and, in a moment of pure, exhausted clarity, wrote on the back, "Maybe you should have left it to someone who could manage it." I didn't send it, didn't need to. Instead, I logged into the county's property tax system. Their house, my childhood home, was flagged, at risk of foreclosure, behind on payments, final notice pending. They were drowning, and they thought I'd be the lifeline again. There was a time, God, not long ago, I would have stepped in, called the bank, negotiated extensions, quietly wired money from my emergency savings and told myself it's just what daughters do. But this time, I poured myself a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, and let it fall. Sometimes, you don't need to set the fire. You just have to stop carrying the water. That's when the next wave hit. A second post from Mom, a sunflower emoji, a photo of her and Dad smiling faintly on the porch. "We raised them with love. We did our best, but sometimes love isn't enough." No names, no direct accusations, but anyone who knew us could connect the dots. Aunt Trish commented, "You two are such strong parents. You don't deserve this." Dad followed the next day. His post was longer, less subtle. "We gave everything to our children, our time, our money, our hearts. We thought we raised them right, but in the end, you can't control who turns their back on you." He tagged me. No call, no message, just a public display, a digital scarlet letter. I stared at it for a long time. Not angry, just hollow. They weren't asking for help anymore, they were asking for sympathy from anyone but me. And they were getting it. Because people don't want the truth, they want a story, and my family had given them one. They didn't text this time, they came. It was a Thursday morning. I was in the middle of prepping slides for a departmental review when the front desk buzzed. "Miss Whitmore, your parents are here, and a man who says he's your brother." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I stared at the blinking light on the landline like it might disappear if I blinked hard enough. "They said it's urgent," the receptionist added. "Should I send them up?" I took a breath, slow and flat. "Please, tell them I'm not available and that they're not expected." A pause. "They said they'll wait." Of course they would. I didn't rush. I finished building the slide deck, checked it for errors, sent the link to my manager. Then I answered 2 emails and filed a reimbursement request for a conference I wasn't even sure I'd attend. 20 minutes passed. When I finally stepped into the lobby, they were exactly where I thought they'd be, clustered near the entry like a campaign photo gone stale. Dad, rigid and upright, fists resting on his hips like he was bracing for a school board meeting. Mom clutching her purse like a peace offering. And Brady, shoulders hunched like he regretted every second of being dragged here. They turned when I walked through the glass doors, but no one stepped forward. I stopped 10 feet away. No hug, no smile, no script. "Madeline," Mom said, voice already laced with edge. "We need to talk." I didn't look at her, not at first. My eyes drifted over the automatic doors, out onto the street. Traffic passed like white noise. "I'm at work," I said. Dad cleared his throat. "You'd really let us lose the house over this?" I let the words sit. "Then you really thought I wouldn't?" He flinched. "Don't do this," Mom said, stepping forward now, voice softening. "You've always been the strong one. We thought you'd understand." There it was again, that poison-sweet phrase, strong, translation, self-sacrificing, replaceable, unworthy of need. I met her eyes. "You used that as an excuse to forget me." Brady muttered something, quiet, half-hearted. "I didn't ask for any of this, but you took it," I said. His head dropped. He looked down at his shoes like he expected forgiveness to be buried beneath them. Dad's posture stiffened. "We fed you. We raised you. You owe us something." The words didn't hit like he thought they would. I almost laughed. "I paid that debt every month, every year. I covered your mortgage, your prescriptions, your overdue bills. And when you decided to erase me, you didn't even look back." Mom's lip trembled. "We didn't mean to hurt you." I took one step closer. "Then why did you wait until I disappeared to realize I was the one holding it all up?" She said nothing. Neither did Dad. Brady looked like he wanted to bolt. I think he would have if the doors behind him hadn't felt too far away. He reached for the elevator button. I raised a hand. "Don't." He froze. "You're not coming up. You're not coming in. This isn't your home, your refuge, your fallback plan anymore." Mom started to speak, but I cut her off. "I won't be your answer this time. No shouting, no scene, just stillness." They stood there, 3 people, who once called themselves my family, and I was done being the one who kept pretending blood made anything sacred. They didn't follow me back in. Maybe they knew I wouldn't look back. Maybe, for the first time, they realized the door they used to keep open only swung one way now. I rode the elevator up alone. My reflection in the stainless steel walls didn't look angry. It looked settled, the kind of settled that comes after a storm's passed, and all that's left is broken tree limbs and sky too quiet. When I stepped back into my office, the air felt different. Still mine. Still intact, untouched by them. But they weren't done. Of course they weren't. 15 minutes later, a text from Mom. "We're downstairs. Open the door." Then another. "We're not leaving until we talk to you." I didn't reply, didn't acknowledge the buzz of the phone. I watched as the afternoon light shifted across my desk, inching past the edge of my laptop, like time was reclaiming the space they had taken up. I finished 2 more reports. At 4:12 p.m., another message came. A screenshot of a bank transfer request. Same amount, $3,200, 0 cents. Same silence. This time, I didn't just decline, I blocked the sender. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. They were speaking a language I no longer answered to. Assumption, obligation, manipulation dressed as need. I went home early that day, walked the long way through Centennial Park, past the dog fountain and the sycamores starting to go gold. The leaves crunched beneath my heels like paper things long forgotten. It should have hurt more, I told myself, but truthfully, it just felt overdue. When I got home, I found the envelope wedged between the door and the frame. No stamp, no name, no handwriting I recognized. Inside, a single page, typed, cold, notice of foreclosure pending. They hadn't mailed it, they had delivered it. Whether out of desperation or drama, I didn't know, but I read every word. It was real, it was happening. The house was 3 payments behind, penalties accruing, no buffer, no bailout coming, and I could have stopped it. Easy. One transfer, one phone call, one soft return to the role I had always played. But I didn't. I poured a glass of water, sat down at the kitchen table, let the page lie in front of me like a confession, and I didn't move. There was no joy in it, no vengeance, just release. They had always seen me as the one who could carry everything, because I had, without complaint, without praise, without pause. But now they would learn what it felt like when I put it all down. That night, I muted my phone, lit the candle I kept on the bookshelf but never used, made pasta from scratch for no one but me. And, in the glow of that quiet kitchen, I wrote a single sentence on the back of the foreclosure letter. Maybe you should have left it to the one who kept it standing. I didn't send it. Didn't need to. Sometimes the only power left is silence. The next morning, my inbox pinged, not from them, but from a stranger, an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, "They lied to you. There's more." And below that, a link. No message, no signature, just a breadcrumb. For a second, my hand hovered over the mouse. Then, slowly, I clicked. The link led to a cloud drive folder titled simply, Whitmore Trust. Inside, a series of documents, clean, organized, labeled with years I didn't recognize. The sender. The email address was a string of initials and numbers, anonymous, deliberate, but the contents weren't random. They were precise, deliberate, and undeniably meant for me. I opened the folder for the year I moved back to Tennessee. 2013. That was the year I turned down the job in Boston. The year Mom said she slept better when I lived close. The year Brady had one of his faces, couldn't hold a job, had to move back in, blamed the world and a broken guitar string. And it was the year my name disappeared from the Whitmore family trust. It wasn't obvious at first. The documents were written in financialese, lines of distributions, beneficiary allocations, fund movements. But once I knew what I was looking at, the pattern screamed at me. In early 2013, the trust listed 2 beneficiaries, Madeline Whitmore, 50%, Brady Whitmore, 50%. By the end of the year, my name was gone, not adjusted, not minimized, erased. I sat back in my chair, the blue glow of my laptop screen pooling across my knees. For a second, I didn't feel anything. No anger, no betrayal, just an eerie calm, like finding a burnt-down house and realizing you smelled the smoke years ago. You just didn't know what it meant. I scrolled down. More folders, more years. The numbers told a quiet story. Trust funds that should have grown, but instead thinned, then hemorrhaged. Transfers marked as disbursement, rehabilitation, emergency fund. B. Whitmore. Vehicle replacement. $11,000, 0 cents in 2017. $9,200, 0 cents in 2019. Another $14,000, 0 cents just last year, 6 weeks before they updated the will. All of it to Brady. No notes, no repayment plans, just cash flowing out like the trust was a faucet only turned on for one child. I clicked open the folder labeled legal. Inside was a scanned PDF, amended trust agreement, Whitmore Family Trust, dated September 2013, signed by both my parents. I read every line, eyes tracing words I knew were never meant for me. It wasn't just favoritism, it was financial betrayal. They had rebuilt the family legacy around my absence. And they'd never said a word. My phone buzzed beside me. Them. Thank God. A name I hadn't seen in months. Riley Green. I hadn't told her everything, just fragments, enough to keep her curious. But now I needed her clarity. I answered, "No, hello. I need you to look at something," I said. "Address or inbox?" "Inbox. Sending it now." There was silence as she opened the files. Then her voice, cool, clipped, professional. "I've seen this structure before. You weren't just removed, Mads. They restructured the entire trust to protect the flow to Brady. And they did it while you were living in the same state. That's deliberate. Is it illegal? A pause. Depends on who knew what. But it's definitely unethical and possibly fraudulent. If they used your name for anything after removing you," I rubbed my temples. "I wouldn't even know where to look." "I would." Her tone shifted, something steely underneath. "Meet me tomorrow, my office, 9 a.m. sharp. Think it's time we open the whole damn vault." Riley's office sat in a converted Victorian on the edge of Hillsborough Village. Nothing about it looked like justice. The windows were too clean, the bookshelves too decorative, but when she shut the door behind me and dimmed the blinds, the air shifted. It felt like strategy. She motioned to the table. My name was already printed on a legal pad. "You said there might have been documents signed in your name?" she asked, already tapping on her laptop. I nodded. "I don't have hard proof yet, just instincts, moments that didn't feel right." "Tell me the first one." I hesitated, then spoke. 2014, Dad asked me to swing by the bank because they needed to update a signature card. Said it was for a joint account for emergencies. But when I got there, the paperwork was already filled. All I had to do was sign. "Did you read it?" I skimmed. It looked standard. And honestly, I didn't think twice. "It was my parents." Riley looked up, her expression softening just slightly. "That's how they count on it." She tapped a few keys, then pulled up a database. Courthouse filings, trustee declarations, amendment logs. She worked like a surgeon, efficient and unsentimental. I sat there numb and watching until she muttered, "Found it." I leaned forward. There, in a 2015 filing, was a line in small print. "Secondary guardian for emergency medical power of attorney Madeline Whitmore." "What is that?" I asked. She exhaled. "They listed you as a guardian proxy, but only for Brady. That means if anything ever happened to him and they were incapacitated, you'd legally be on the hook for his decisions and potentially his debts." My stomach turned. "I never agreed to that." "You did," she said, turning her screen toward me. "That day, at the bank, that signature, it's on the record." I stared at it. My own handwriting, neat and sharp, obliging, trusting. "That's why they kept you close," I said. "Not because I made them feel safe, because I was the safety net." Riley nodded. "They didn't just erase you from the trust. They reconfigured your value, not as a beneficiary, but as a backup plan." It was hard to breathe for a moment. "They used me to protect him," I said, "and cut me out to protect themselves." Riley didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence was answer enough. When I finally looked back up, she was printing something. "I need you to read this," she said, sliding it over. "It's the amended trust structure from 2019. You're not just removed from the payout, your name's been marked as conflict of interest." I blinked. "What?" "They added a clause. If you challenge any part of the trust legally, you automatically void any remaining rights you might have. Inheritance, property stake, medical proxy. It's a firewall. They knew this might come back." I sat still, cold. They planned for my silence, and they planned for my retaliation. Riley leaned forward. "What they didn't plan for was someone sending you the proof." We both stared at the file for a moment. It felt heavier than it looked. Then, I said it. The thing that had been building in my throat since the day I found the will. "I don't think Brady knows." Riley tilted her head. "About the money?" "About all of it. Think they kept him in the dark, let him believe he was special, chosen. I think they used him too, just in a different way." She considered that, then nodded slowly. "Maybe, but whether or not he knows doesn't change the harm." "No," I agreed, "but it might change the ending." She closed the laptop. "So, what do you want to do?" I folded my hands in my lap. The answer came quicker than I expected. "I want to know everything." Riley nodded. "Then we keep digging." And we would. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but for the first time, for truth. I parked outside the medical records facility in Franklin just after noon, the Tennessee sun sharpening every edge of the modest red brick building like it was daring me to walk in. Riley had found the lead late the night before, a reference line buried in a trusty footnote from 2015, secondary guardian J. Whitmore. At first, we assumed it referred to me, but it didn't. It was Judith Whitmore, my father's sister, the same aunt who moved out west when I was 12 and never came back, the one who always sent cards without return addresses, and once told me during a family barbecue, "Sometimes the safest distance is complete silence." Now I understood why. Inside, the waiting area smelled like floor wax and stale coffee. A receptionist named Mia scanned my ID and motioned to a small consultation room while she fetched the files. Brady's files. They shouldn't have been accessible to me, but according to the form Riley had prepared, I was still listed as a medical decision proxy. Ironic. After all this, they'd left that piece in place. Probably because they never imagined I'd use it. The door opened. A thin folder slid onto the table. Mia didn't say a word. She just nodded and left. I opened it slowly, expecting, what? Immunization records? A list of allergies? Instead, I saw the first intake form, January 3, 2008. Admittance, Adolescent Behavioral Stabilization Program. I stared. Age of patient, 13. Diagnosis, intermittent explosive disorder. Recommended treatment, 6-month outpatient plus parental therapy sessions. There were more pages. Progress, notes, evaluation letters, doctor's handwriting looping and sharp. Patient exhibits signs of severe emotional dependency and maladaptive coping patterns. Strong familial reinforcement appears absent. I turned page after page, tracing the slow, bureaucratic unraveling of a boy who never learned how to be accountable because everyone around him kept cushioning the impact. Brady had been in and out of therapy programs from age 13 to 19, 2 suspensions from high school. One note from a counselor stating, "Recommend limited financial autonomy until stability is demonstrated." I should have been furious, but I wasn't. I was hollowed out by a deeper kind of betrayal. They didn't just lie to me. They built me to be the contrast. Brady wasn't the golden child. He was the fragile one. And I was the frame they hung him in, strong enough to hold the weight, invisible enough to be ignored. I kept reading. In a 2014 note, a physician had written, Patient remains non-compliant with medication. Guardian reports frequent episodes of withdrawal, entitlement, and verbal aggression. Guardian, Elaine Whitmore. There was a final form, unsigned, from 2017, a transfer proposal suggesting Brady might qualify for a supported living arrangement if his primary caregivers were no longer able to sustain care. It was never processed, but the recommendation included one chilling line: alternate guardian listed, Madeline Whitmore. I didn't remember agreeing to that, but my name was there, printed in black ink beside a title I'd never claimed. I closed the folder. Everything made sense now. Why they'd kept me close, why they never asked for my opinion, only my presence. They weren't planning for Brady to thrive. They were planning for him to fail, and for me to catch him. Always. I left the building with the file pressed flat against my chest like a shield I hadn't asked for. The air outside had that sharp southern dryness that warned of storms coming without clouds, heat and pressure, with nowhere to go. Back in the car, I didn't start the engine. I just sat there with the envelope in my lap, staring through the windshield, feeling like someone had rewound the last 2 decades of my life and dubbed a different audio track over every memory. They'd planned this. Or maybe it hadn't been a single plan. Maybe it was something worse. Habit, a long, quiet pattern of decisions made with one simple belief at the center. Brady breaks. I hold. Over and over. Until one day, they stopped asking if I could carry it. They just assumed I would. And now I understood why Aunt Judith had left. I remembered her at my 16th birthday. She stayed just long enough to hand me a book. Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, before vanishing again with a line that made no sense at the time. You deserve a life without translation. Back then I thought she meant college. Now I knew better. She'd seen the blueprint, the weight I hadn't yet realized I was assigned to carry, and unlike me, she ran before it welded itself to her spine. My phone buzzed. "Riley." "You're still listed," she said, the moment I answered. Medical proxy, legal fallback, even as a silent trust recipient, meaning they may have leveraged your name on paper to apply for certain tax deferments. My voice came out quiet, so they didn't just erase me. They reattached me where it was convenient. Exactly. And if they get hit with a liability claim or audit, it could hit you too. Not likely, but possible, especially if they used your signature without full disclosure. Do I have a legal case? Yes, she said without hesitation. But that's not really the question, is it? I didn't respond, because she was right. The question wasn't whether I could fight them. It was whether I wanted to. We met later that evening in her office again. The windows were darker this time, the street lights outside glowing like they were keeping secrets. Riley slid another document across the table. "What's this?" "Failed this morning. Your parents submitted a request for emergency property protection. They're claiming financial duress caused by a family member's refusal to uphold prior obligations." I blinked. "They're naming me?" "They didn't include your name, but the implication is loud, and if they follow through, if they try to claim you as a legal risk, it opens up discovery. They're trying to bait me into reacting." "Yes," she said, "they want you in court, so they can play the role they've already written, the parents betrayed by the daughter who changed." I exhaled, long, controlled. "They don't want help anymore. They want absolution." Riley folded her arms. "And you're not required to give it." There was silence between us then. Not awkward, just waited. Finally, I said, "I need to know what they risked for him, all of it. If they put the house on the line, if they forged signatures, if they buried anything deeper, I want it brought to light." Riley nodded once, and for the first time, her voice shifted into something closer to admiration. Then we stopped playing defense. I stood, gripping the back of the chair for a beat longer than I meant to. They're going to say I'm cruel. They already are, she said. I didn't flinch. Then let them. The last time I stood in that house, I was 24 and invisible. This time, I rang the bell like I owned the door. It wasn't symbolic, it was strategy. I wanted them to hear me before I wanted the anticipation, the disorientation. The moment they opened that door and realized I was no longer the daughter they could shame into silence. Elaine answered. She looked older than I remembered, more foundation, thinner lips, but the expression was the same, a practiced calm, so polished it cracked. "Madeline," she said, blinking once. "You're here." "Yes," I replied evenly. "We need to talk, all of us." She opened the door wider, but not fully. "This isn't a good time." "Exactly why I'm here." She stepped aside reluctantly, and I walked in. The house smelled like the past, old cedar and something sweet on the edge of burning. Brady was sitting in the kitchen, elbows on the granite island, staring into a bowl of cereal like it held prophecy. He didn't look up. Elaine tried again. "Whatever this is, we can discuss it privately." "No," I said. "Not this time." "Where's Dad?" A shuffle, then footsteps. And there, he was Victor Whitmore, the man who taught me that withholding affection was a form of control. Still in his usual slacks and starched shirt, though the collar sat a little looser now. He paused when he saw me, a flicker of something, maybe caution, maybe regret, passing through his eyes. "I'll keep it brief," I began, placing the manila folder on the table between us. "Here's a copy of the trust amendments you filed without my knowledge. The silent beneficiary clause, the medical authorizations, the loan disclosures under my name." Victor's jaw shifted, but he said nothing. Brady finally looked up. "You came here to gloat," he said bitterly. "To watch us burn?" "No," I said. "I came to return what you left behind." I opened my bag and pulled out an envelope. Inside it was the photo, one taken when we were kids, a rare moment. Me, Brady, and our parents at a park. I was 7, Brady was 4. Everyone smiling, frozen in a lie. "I spent years convincing myself that image meant something," I said. "That if I could just be enough, smart enough, useful enough, you'd look at me like you looked at him." Elaine flinched, just slightly. Victor's arms crossed. "But it was never about me. It was about what I could do for you. And when I stopped playing the part when I left, you rewrote the narrative. You used my silence as permission." "But I'm not silent anymore," Brady scoffed. "You think showing up with receipts makes you better than us?" "No," I said. "It just makes me free." The room shifted. Not loudly, just enough to feel the ground give way. Elaine walked toward me, slow, almost rehearsed. Her voice dropped into that tone she used when I was a kid, sweet on the surface, sharpened underneath. "You don't understand the burden of family legacy, of protecting what your father built." "I do," I said. "That's why I left." Victor finally spoke. "What is it you want, Madeline?" His voice was calm, flat, like a man who already assumes the answer won't touch him. I looked at each of them, one by one. "I want accountability," I said, "and I want it on the record." Then I turned to Brady. "And I want you to tell the truth to everyone." He froze. "What truth?" I placed a final document on the table. It was a deposition request, filed that morning. "Because next week you'll be testifying under oath." The silence after I placed the deposition was thick enough to suffocate. Brady's face had drained of color. Elaine's jaw tensed like she was trying to swallow her fury, and Victor, he stood utterly still, too still, like a man trained to pretend control in a room that was imploding. Brady reached for the paper, hands trembling. "This is insane," he muttered, eyes darting between the words. You think this'll scare me? I think, I said evenly, you finally need to answer for what you've done. You're bluffing. No, I said, voice cutting through him like ice. You are. You bluffed your way through college admissions with fake internships. You bluffed your way into a management position at Whitmore Holdings because of a last name. You used my credit, my inheritance, my name, and you thought I'd never come back for it. Victor's voice snapped like a whip. Enough. But I turned on him. No, I said, with the heat of every year I spent swallowing myself. You don't get to say enough. You stood by while he drained my trust fund. You co-signed fraudulent transfers. You let Elaine call me unstable when I moved out, when all I did was protect myself. Elaine stepped forward now, her tone syrupy, deliberate. This doesn't help anyone, Madeline. You mean it doesn't help you? The room simmered. I could see it, how they all expected me to break, to fold like I did at 24 when I left with a backpack and bruises no one saw. But I didn't flinch. I looked at Brady again. You have 5 days to prepare. I suggest you use them well. You'll be deposed by a federal attorney about misuse of funds, about tax evasion, and about the forged signature on my power of attorney. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then, finally, he cracked. It wasn't just me, he snapped. Dad signed off on it. Elaine knew. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. It was never about getting an apology. It was about watching the unraveling begin. Victor turned to him, stunned. What the hell are you doing? I'm not going to prison for your lies, Brady spat. Elaine lost control then, grabbing the deposition and tearing it in half like paper could unwrite what was already filed. This family, she hissed, was fine until you came back. No, I said, low but firm. It was quiet, not fine. There's a difference. I stepped back, gathering the originals. The court date is set. You'll get the summons. Madeline, please. Victor's voice was quieter now, but it wasn't regret I heard. It was fear, not for me, for himself. I gave you 27 years, I said. You gave me silence. You made me think I had to earn being loved. That ends now. As I turned toward the door, Elaine said one last thing. You'll destroy the Whitmore name? I paused. No, I said without looking back. I'm rebuilding what you tried to bury. Outside, the late afternoon sun warmed my face. I didn't cry, I didn't collapse, I exhaled. And I walked. Each step away from the house felt lighter, not because the war was over, but because I had stopped carrying it alone. I didn't need them to fall to feel victorious. I needed the truth to stand, and it finally did. Thank you for staying with us through this deeply personal journey. Madeline's story isn't just about betrayal, secrets, or revenge. It's about reclaiming your voice in a world that tried to silence it. It's about walking away not just from people, but from the version of yourself that believed you had to earn love by sacrificing truth. If this story touched you, made you think of your own unspoken pain, or reminded you that healing sometimes begins with walking away, then know this: you're not alone, and your truth matters. We want to thank each and every one of you who listens, feels, and shares these moments with us. Your support is what makes stories like Madeline's more than fiction. It makes them a mirror, a reckoning, a beginning. Until next time, take care of your heart, and never apologize for choosing peace over approval.